How do you know it's mid-July? Because it's list time, baby. We're doing lists here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. 2 weeks left in this month, probably just a day or two shy of that. Left until training camp begins, so we're going to clock through these next couple weeks by getting all kinds of training camp preview content. We're going to be breaking down positions. We're going to be talking about, big games. We're going to be looking at the schedule, all the different things that we do when training camp is just around the corner and it's almost time to finally get ready for real football. And we're starting it today with a list of 5 breakout candidates on offense, 5 players to watch. And look, I know your immediate reaction, if you even push play on this video, because you might have looked at the headline and you were like, are you kidding me? 5 players to watch? 5 breakout candidates? Is that what we're doing? And I appreciate it if you saw that and you push play and said, I'm still going to patronize this content. But I think it's still interesting to talk about because I got 5 guys that I'm kind of ranking in order of most obvious to maybe least obvious. So, there's going to be a couple guys that I mention here that you're going to be like, well, yeah, of course that guy is going to have a breakout campaign. And then there's going to be a couple guys you're like, never really thought about him, but that's going to be an interesting one to watch. And we'll write this all down, take notes, and we'll see if we end up being right about it. I think a couple, like I said, are really obvious. There's one that I'm going to stake the future of humanity on, and then there's a couple that I think are maybe a little bit less obvious, but there's a real chance. And maybe one guy that you may not have thought about since the season ended. Quite frankly, like his name may not even have crossed your mind. Like even, when we get through the doldrums of spring and summer and people are asking, what's up with this guy? What's up with this guy? And there are some names that come up a lot. And this is one that has not. And I think it might be a guy that you're not thinking of at all, which is why I put him on this list. But I can make a case for it. All right, I'm not just going to throw it out there because it's a random guy you are not thinking about. I can actually make a case for it. I have numbers that I wrote down. We'll talk about those, about why this guy could be a breakout candidate. But like I said, we're going to go from most obvious to least obvious. He's going to be the last one we mention when we get there. So let's do it. 5 breakout candidates, 5 players to watch on offense for Pitt this season on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I say that sort of mockingly, like, oh, we're doing lists now, 5 breakout players to watch. But maybe this is the kind of thing that gets YouTube engagement. You know what I mean? Maybe this is the kind of thing that the algorithm really likes. So we'll have to, we'll have to see. We'll have to see if maybe this one gets the old clicks, and then that little man in the internet who sends out checks for clicks can send me a nice big check, because that's how it works. I think in a lot of people's imagination is that there's a little accountant who works in the internet and sends out a check for dollars every click you get. Not quite, but we're going to see if this one can get that little guy activated. Anyway, you know the deal. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the YouTube channel. We ask that you like this video and subscribe. Before we even jump into it, you might as well just do it, and then we'll get it done and get it over with. And then after the video, go over to Panther-Lair.com and talk about this list and tell me about all the things that are wrong. You can put your comments in the comment section here on YouTube, or you can go over to the message boards at Panther-Lair.com and have the conversation over there. We'll talk about 5 breakout players, guys to watch. You'll tell me who I forgot and who I overlooked, and maybe who was a bad idea to begin with. But I tell you who's not a bad option for a breakout candidate this year, for a guy who's going to have a career season. And I should say right off the bat of what we're talking about when we say breakout year, breakout candidate. We're talking about somebody who has a career season for the most part. I'm going to bend this definition a little bit throughout the day today, and then tomorrow when we get into the defensive guys. We're talking about guys who more, for the most part, are players who will have career seasons. They'll put up numbers they've never put up before. And that's how we're sort of going to loosely define a breakout candidate, a breakout season. So these are guys who might have contributed in the past, but we think they're going to exceed those previous contributions, their career numbers this season. So we're talking about guys who are going to do more than they ever have, and ideally in a good way, in 2024. And so the first one, I mean, obviously, and I think it's a very obvious option, is Nate Yarnell, the quarterback. Obviously, he started the last 2 games of the season, Boston College and Duke. Led them to a win over Boston College. Couldn't get it done against Duke, although I would contend that was largely not his fault. Threw 1 interception. He's thrown 1 interception in his career on 51 pass attempts. That was at the Duke, 76 pass attempts and only 1 interception. That interception came at Duke on a play where, you can make a pretty good case that it wasn't his fault, and that was like 1 or 2 snaps after he threw a beautiful pass to Malcolm Epps in the end zone that if Epps actually had caught the ball, would have been a touchdown, and it would have eliminated the possibility of him throwing an interception 1 or 2 plays later. Nate Yarnell was pretty good for Pitt in the final 2 games last season. I've gone over these numbers a lot, that if you take his final 2 starts there and project that out over a 12 or 13 game season, you're getting close to a 3,000 yard season long performance with 20-plus touchdowns and single-digit interceptions. Honk if you would take that performance this year. Hopefully you're not watching this video while you're driving, but remember, if you're listening just to the audio podcast because, I listen to it while I drive, you can open the YouTube app on your phone and play it through there and still just have the audio while having the video play, which, again, gets the little man in the internet excited for me. So maybe you could, you could do it that way. But anyway, honk if you would get excited about a 3,000-yard season with 20-plus touchdowns and single-digit interceptions. And also, I think we can all probably agree that given the schedule, given the rest of this team, given just what generally leads to wins in college football, if you throw for 3,000-plus, 20-some touchdowns and single-digit interceptions, your team is probably going to have a lot of success. Now, want to bring up his performance here real quick, just to make a point that it's not a guarantee. In 2012, Tino Sinceri threw for 3,288 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, and his team went 6-7. That was a team with a lot of inherent flaws, a lot of culture issues, a lot of problems, right? We've gone over that 2012 team many times. The Youngstown State game, the Notre Dame game, the Connecticut game. There were games that they blew that they shouldn't have lost those 3 games. Those were 3 games they should have won. And you don't have to say about, the Cincinnati game or anything like that. Don't lose to a 1AA team. Convert like 1/3 down in the 4th quarter and you beat Notre Dame on the road out there for a huge win. And then maybe if you win that game, you don't have a giant hangover a week later at Connecticut and end up losing that one. And that's the difference between 6-6 in the regular season and 9-3. Tino Sinceri's stat line, at least 3,200 yards, 21 touchdowns, 3 picks, is the stat line of a quarterback who goes 9-3 in the regular season. Unfortunately, Tino was Tino, and that team was that team, and so they fell a bit short. I would contend, and I think you would agree, that if Nate Yarnell throws for 3,200 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, Pitt will go 9-3. It's far more likely to go 9-3 than 6-6. Would we not all agree about that? I think we would. I don't know if Nate Yarnell is going to go for 3,200, 21, and 3, but I think, and that's sort of the flaw in taking, the 2 games against, Boston College and Duke. If you project them over 13 games, this is what his stats could be. My point is, in those 2 games, he played at the caliber, at the level of a quarterback who puts up those kind of numbers. You can think in your head about a 3,000-yard, 20-touchdown, single-digit interception quarterback. That's who Nate Yarnell was in those 2 games. Now, what you do in 2 games doesn't necessarily, entirely portend what you're going to do in 12 games, but it gives you an idea of what the potential is, of what's sort of lurking inside there, of what he could be. Some of those games over the course of the 12, the schedule this season are going to be a little bit tougher than Boston College and Duke, but a whole bunch of them aren't. And so Nate Yarnell should very much be in position to build on the performance he had at the end of last season as a full-time starter, going into the season as a full-time starter. Unless there were any doubt about Pitt's certainty that Nate Yarnell will be the full-time starter, they announced yesterday that he's going to Charlotte next week for the ACC Media Days along with Gavin Bartholomew and Donovan McMillan. I think if there was there's always a non-zero chance that a guy can lose the job in training camp, but I think if there was a substantial chance of any kind that Eli Holstein would overtake Nate Yarnell in training camp, then Yarnell would not be going to media days. But he's going next week, the ACC kickoff, colloquially known as ACC Media Days. He's going down there as a Pitt representative, as well he should. I think it's Nate Yarnell's job to lose, and I don't think he's going to lose it. He's going to be the starting quarterback this season, and I think he'll put up career numbers. Now, this is where we get into that whole thing about career numbers and breakout seasons. He's thrown 76 passes in his career. And not all of them were in one season. Last year, what was his... He threw 62 passes last year. He will probably eclipse that by the end of week 2. So he's going to put up career numbers for pass attempts. His career high in a season is 62. Passing yards, his career high in a season is 595. Passing touchdowns, his career high in a season is 4. So yes, Nate Yarnell will set all new career numbers, but I think he will also be a breakout player for Pitt as a very good quarterback. And so in addition to breaking his statistical career highs, I think he'll also have the best season of his career. Nope. Scratch that remark because that's stupid. Of course he's going to have the best season of his career because he's been so limited in the past. I think he'll be an asset. I think he'll be a net positive for Pitt and play well. So I think Nate Yarnell will have a breakout season this year. Also on the obvious train, breakout season incoming for Kenny Johnson, sophomore wide receiver who showed some flashes last season, most notably on a kickoff return touchdown that he had. Which game was that? I should have this in front of me. I'm North Carolina. There it is. I'm like scanning through his bio trying to remember when that kickoff return touchdown was. It was against North Carolina. But here's one that's going to be in the obvious category, that Kenny Johnson will be a breakout candidate this year in terms of statistical production because last year he caught 15 passes for 122 yards and 1 touchdown. He will eclipse all 3 of those numbers this year. He might even break his rushing totals. Last year he had 10 carries for 72 yards, which is pretty good considering his long was only 14 yards. He averaged 7.2 yards per carry. He might break those numbers, 10 for 72, but I think he'll definitely break the career receiving numbers, 15 for 122 and a touchdown. I think, and I've mentioned a lot of times about about Johnson's usage in the spring game when they threw him the ball a ton. It seemed like he had about 12 or 13 targets in that spring game. And while the spring game is obviously not going to be a full indication of what the offense will look like, I do think that was a bit of their intention and will be a bit of their intention this season to get Kenny Johnson the ball early and often throughout the games and throughout the season. I think he's going to be a primary focus. Obviously, Kanate Mumfield's going to be in that group. Obviously, Raphael Williams and CJ Lee will be heavily targeted, and a couple other guys I'm going to talk about on this list coming up. But I think Johnson's going to probably be, if not number 1 in targets, which might be Mumfield, Johnson might be number 2 in targets. I think he's going to be a heavy point of emphasis in this offense. I think he's going to put up career numbers because I don't think anyone would doubt that. But I think he is a player to watch for a breakout season. And it's a breakout just because he's a sophomore and had limited usage last year. But I think Kenny Johnson's going to be a heavy, like I say, focal point in this passing offense. And I think he's going to see a lot of targets and put up some big numbers, as will be the case for our friend, your friend, El Barto, Gavin Bartholomew. Now, Gavin Bartholomew, if there's any good left in this world, if whatever little faith in humanity I still have remaining is to be, maintained, Gavin Bartholomew will be a top 3 receiver for this team in 2024. In targets, in receptions, in receiving touchdowns. Gavin Bartholomew's usage over the past 2 seasons has been nothing short of criminal, and we give him a pass on 2021 because he was sharing time with Lucas Krull. Between the two of them, they had a legitimate, effective tight end stat line. Since then, it's all been downhill. 2022, Gavin Bartholomew caught the ball 21 times and scored 2 touchdowns. Last season, he caught the ball 18 times and scored 1 touchdown. Granted, he only played 10 games, but averaging less than 2 receptions per game for Gavin Bartholomew is a crime. It's criminal malpractice. And even if you didn't have all of the tomfoolery regarding the quarterback situation over the course of the season, I would still say it was a fireable offense to not use Gavin Bartholomew more through the 10 games in which he was healthy. One of the greatest mysteries, and look, there are many mysteries about the Frank Cignetti 2.0 era at Pitt, few surpass Gavin Bartholomew's usage. As a matter of fact, if it wasn't such a disaster with the quarterback situation this past season and the decision-making that went into the quarterback personnel this past season, I would say there are no greater mysteries of the Frank Cignetti 2.0 era than Gavin Bartholomew's usage. Whatever Cignetti had against Bartholomew, I will never know, I will never understand, and I will likely never agree with. The man himself could be here to explain it to us, and I still don't think I would understand it. Because this was legitimately one of the playmakers on this team for a passing game that could never get off the ground, largely due to the play of the quarterback, but for a passing game that could never get off the ground in 2022 or 2023 to use Gavin Bartholomew as little as he was used is a crime, was a crime. And I can only hope that Cade Bell understands that and makes good on Bartholomew's potential this season. There were, last year in the Power 5, Power 4 conferences, there were 58 tight ends who were targeted 25 times or more. Gavin Bartholomew was targeted 27 times. Of those 58 Power 5 tight ends who saw at least 25 passing targets, Gavin Bartholomew was number 2 in the nation in yards per reception, averaging 18.1 yards per catch. But the problem is, he only had 27 targets. And that put him number 50 in the nation among Power 5 tight ends. You can't tell me there were legitimately 49 tight ends in the Power 5 conferences who deserve more passing targets than Gavin Bartholomew. And granted, he only played 10 games. So we keep that in mind. He only played 10 games. But to have 49 Power 5 tight ends see the ball more than that guy is malpractice. Coaching malpractice and a fireable offense. Cade Bell needs to not make the same mistake that Frank Cignetti did last season and in 2022. It makes no sense. It really doesn't. And again, the quarterback situation was part of it. And, were Phil Dracovic and, Christian Vare throwing to Gavin Bartholomew as often as they should have been? Maybe, maybe not. Could they have made better decisions in getting him the ball? Maybe, maybe not. Was the offensive coordinator not committed to getting the ball to Gavin Bartholomew? Yeah, I think so. And that's a crime. Cade Bell needs to rectify that. Cade Bell needs to emphasize Gavin Bartholomew. Cade Bell needs to utilize Gavin Bartholomew as one of the primary options in this passing offense. I'm really intrigued to see what Raphael Williams can do. I'm really intrigued to see what Sincere Lee can do. I'm really intrigued to see what Kanate Mumfield and Kenny Johnson can do in a brand new offense. But Gavin Bartholomew's got to be part of it, man. You get one more year with this guy. Make the most of it, please. All right, next guy on the list. Breakout season. Oh, so Gavin Bartholomew, what would a breakout season mean? That would mean, his career high in receptions is 27. He set that in 2021. His career high in receiving yards is 326, which actually was this past season. And his career high in receiving touchdowns was 4 in 2021. I think he sets a new career number for receptions. I think he sets it, which would mean more than 27. I think he sets a new career number for receiving yards, which would be more than 326. And I'll even go so far as to say that he sets a new career high for receiving touchdowns, which would mean more than 4. I think you're looking at 30 to 40 receptions, 400 to 500 receiving yards, and at least 5 receiving touchdowns for Gavin Bartholomew, all 3 of which would set new career high numbers for the senior tight end. And if he falls short of that, what little faith in humanity I have might be fully lost. Next guy that I think will be having a breakout season this year. And I think this one, The breakout season started last year, but I think it fully emerges this season with what even might be an all-conference performance. Maybe not first team, but possibly second team or third team, and it's Terrence Moore. Now, Terrence Moore started the final 9 games of the season last year at center. I think he had an up and down year, being thrust into the job for his first time as the starting center. I think by the end of the year, he was playing pretty well. And I think over this offseason, from everything we've heard and seen, he has really emerged as one of the leaders of the offensive line, one of the leaders of the offense, and possibly one of the leaders of the team. Terrence Moore now is a redshirt junior, so he's one of the older players on the team. I think he has taken on that leadership role. I think he's comfortable in a leadership role, and I think he has really established himself as one of the key players on this offense, certainly on the line, and I think on the offense as a whole and on the team. And that's a big step. I think this is an offense that's going to need leaders to emerge. I think Nate Yarnell potentially could be one of those guys. I think Terrence Moore will be one of those guys. I think he earned a lot of respect from the guys around him last season, and I think that he'll carry that into this year and be a full 12 or 13 game starter, and I think play at an all-conference level. I think Terrence Moore, by the end of the year, will have a reputation as one of the better centers in the conference. That's not always something that's easy for us to see from the press box and from the stands, but I think that by the end of the year, he'll have that reputation. And I think he'll do well in operating this new offense. I think he's a guy to watch as a breakout player. And then number 5, and this is the guy that maybe is the least likely, or maybe the last one on your mind, the least obvious, I should say. I think Dejon Reynolds is going to have a breakout season this year. And he's the guy that I was talking about at the beginning that is probably not even someone that's on your mind. Like, I wouldn't blame you or be surprised if you said to me, damn, I haven't thought about Dejon Reynolds once since the end of the season. And maybe not even the last game of the season, maybe even earlier than that. And that's understandable. I mean, he wasn't Bub Means, he wasn't Kanate Mumfield. And those were really the only 2 guys that anybody really talked about in the passing game last year. And he wasn't Kenny Johnson, who was the young, exciting freshman who was surprising everyone. He finished the season with 28 catches, 316 yards, no touchdowns. He only averaged, 11 yards per catch or something like that. It just not anything spectacular, not anything sensational. And yet, I think quietly, Dejon Reynolds finished the season as well as any Pitt receiver. I was looking over the final 6 games last year. Reynolds was targeted 29 times and caught 20 passes. That's 69% completion or reception rate. If that was his reception rate over the course of the whole season, he would have had the best reception rate of any receiver on the team who had more than 1 target on the year. Yeah, that's how good he was. And it was a remarkable turnaround from the first 6 games when Reynolds had 8 catches on 21 targets. That's less than 40% reception rate. So in the first 6 games, less than 40% reception rate, he only catches 8 passes. In the final 6, he goes almost for 70% completion rate, catches 20 passes, and his reception rate was better over those final 6 games than Bub Means and Kanate Mumfield. He was a more reliable receiver in that stretch. Now, he didn't catch more passes than Bub Means in the final 6 games, but 20 catches over 6 games, I mean, that's a solid, 40 catch pace over a full season, right? We could do that math quick in our head. I don't even have to get the calculator out for that one. I don't know if Dejon Reynolds is going to, catch 70% of his passes for a full season. I don't know if he's going to have 40 receptions. He might settle in the 30s, but I think he will set career highs in receptions, which would mean eclipsing last year's total of 28. I think he'll set a career high in receiving yards, which would mean eclipsing last year's total of 316. And I think he'll set a career high in receiving touchdowns. He didn't have any last year, but when he was at Florida, he had 2 touchdowns. I think he'll do better. I think he'll at least match that with 2 touchdowns. What I think about Dejon Reynolds is this. I think he's going to be a really reliable pass-catching option and somebody that Nate Yarnell can rely on. Kind of that traditional, the way you sometimes think of a tight end as that's the safety valve. That's the the quick outlet. Oh, it's covered. Just check down to the running back into the backfield or the tight end. You can always go to that guy. You'll get a couple yards. I think Dejon Reynolds will be that guy for Pitt. He's not as flashy as Sincere Lee or Raphael Williams. He's not Kanate Mumfield. He's not going to have that kind of role. He's not going to be like a Kenny Johnson type. He's not a tight end. But I think he can be, a solid possession receiver, high reception rate, high percentage guy who just is really reliable for Nate Yarnell and sort of sneakily and, almost maybe quietly, if he gets overshadowed by these home run hitters, ends up being a really reliable option in the passing game that Yarnell can check down to over the middle of the field, find the soft spot in the zone, and just get the ball to Dejon Reynolds. You may not get a lot of yak out of it, but you'll move the chains. You'll get 7-8 yards. You'll be able to keep it rolling by completing passes to Dejon Reynolds. And look, he's the tallest receiver among the scholarship guys. I think they list Kanate Mumfield at 6'1". They list Reynolds at 6'2". All the other guys are listed at 5 foot. They might list Kenny Johnson at 6'1" or something, but Reynolds is the tallest of the receivers, so I think that's got to give him a little bit of a leg up on something. But I don't know. I just think he can have a career year. It might not be. He might not be top 4 or 5. He might not be top 3 or 4 in receptions, receiving yards, or touchdowns. But I think he's going to be productive. And like I say, just reliable and solid. And by the end of the year, you'll be like, yeah, he was a really solid guy, like a Dontez Ford type of guy. Just really solid, make a couple plays, maybe score a touchdown that wins you a game here and there. I think he could be a really solid player for Pitt, a reliable player for Pitt, and have a breakout year and having the best season of his career. So I think we've forgotten about Dejon Reynolds, but I think he can contribute this year. So those are my 5 breakout players, guys, to watch this season. Some of them obvious, maybe some not quite so much, maybe some just nothing but my faith in humanity riding on their production this season. So I mean, not a lot going on there, but yeah, El Barto, you got a lot going on. You got a lot riding on you. So those are my 5 breakout players on offense, 5 guys to watch this season. We'll have 5 to watch on defense tomorrow, unless some major breaking news happens today, and we'll talk about that and push the 5 breakout players on defense back to Thursday. But for now, that's what we got. 5 breakout players to watch on offense this season. Should be interesting to see how those guys do. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And of course, check out the website Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all your Pitt sports news. Everything you can handle, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow on the Morning Pitt right here, YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.